She had been waiting long enough that time itself had begun to lose meaning. On the planet Kavara, the sky never truly darkened. Its star burned low and wide, casting a constant amber twilight across the plains. Shadows stretched but never vanished. Days and nights blurred into one endless, muted glow. For most of her species, that constancy was comforting. For her, it had become a reminder of how long she had been alone. Her name was Salith, and she was the last caretaker of Outpost Eryx. The outpost stood at the edge of the Silent Expanse, a region of space abandoned after the Accord Wars. Long ago, dozens of civilizations had passed through this sector, humans among them, but conflict, fear, and shifting alliances had emptied it. Trade lanes were rerouted. Colonies were evacuated. Stations were dismantled or left to decay. Eryx had been forgotten. Salith's people, the Erewhon, were not warriors. They were observers, archivists of history and emotion. When the Accord dissolved, the Erewhon volunteered to remain behind, recording what happened when civilizations withdrew, how places died, how silence settled in. Salith had been young when she arrived. That was over 30 human years ago. Now she waited. Each cycle, she followed the same routine. She walked the perimeter of the outpost, her elongated fingers brushing the cool metal walls, feeling for changes. She calibrated the listening arrays that scanned the void for signals that never came. She tended the memory cores, crystalline structures that stored echoes of voices, images of visitors long gone. Sometimes she replayed them, laughing traitors, arguing diplomats. A human engineer once sang while repairing a conduit, unaware he was being recorded. Salith had listened to that song more times than she could count. Humans fascinated her. They were brief, intense creatures, burning bright, burning fast. Where the Erewhon felt emotions like slow tides, humans felt them like storms. And then they vanished. The official transmissions had said humans would return one day. They always said that. But years passed, then decades, and the silence remained unbroken. Until one cycle, something changed. It began as a tremor in the sensors, so faint Salith almost dismissed it as interference. She froze mid-step, her attention snapping toward the central console. A distortion ripple. She leaned closer, adjusting the frequency filters. The ripple sharpened, resolving into a pattern she hadn't seen in decades. A ship. Not Erewhon. Not Consortium. Not any of the usual scavenger signatures. Human. Her breath caught, an involuntary reaction she hadn't experienced in years. Her heart accelerated, sending a warm pulse through her chest. A human vessel was emerging from fold space less than 1,000 kilometers from Eryx. That was impossible. No active human routes passed anywhere near the Silent Expanse. The navigation data alone would have marked this region as unstable and abandoned. Yet there it was. The ship was small, scarred. Its hull bore evidence of damage and repair layered upon repair. It drifted at an odd angle, as though struggling to maintain balance. Salith activated the external beacons immediately, broadcasting a standard welcome protocol in every known human dialect. Her voice echoed softly through the empty command chamber. No response. She waited. The ship's trajectory shifted slightly, aligning toward Eryx. Its engines flared weakly, then stabilized. A docking request did not come. Instead, the ship simply approached. Her people valued consent and communication above all else. This silence felt wrong. As the vessel drew closer, Salith could see the markings on its hull, faded human script, partially burned away. She recognized fragments of an old Earth language. Endurance. The name of the ship, perhaps. When it finally locked into the docking ring, the mechanism groaned in protest, metal scraping against metal. The outpost shuddered, as if waking from a long sleep. Salith stood at the airlock, her posture straight, her expression composed despite the chaos in her thoughts. She smoothed the translucent fabric of her robe, reminding herself she was a caretaker first, an observer second. The airlock cycled. Steam hissed as pressure equalized. The inner door slid open. A human stood there. He was taller than she expected, though thinner than most recordings she'd seen. His suit was patched in multiple places, its surface scuffed and darkened. His helmet was retracted, revealing a face marked by exhaustion, creased skin, shadowed eyes, stubble along his jaw. He did not speak. He did not move. He simply stood there, staring at her as if she were something he had dreamed and wasn't sure was real. Salith inclined her head in greeting. "Welcome to Outpost Eric's," she said gently, switching to standard human trade speech. "I am Salith, caretaker of the station. You are safe here." The human's lips parted, but no sound came out. He swayed slightly. Then he collapsed. She moved faster than she thought possible, crossing the threshold and catching him before he hit the floor. His body was warm, radiating heat through her arms. His weight surprised her. Humans were denser than Erwin. She dragged him inside, sealing the airlock behind them. Medical protocols activated automatically, scanning his vitals. Severe dehydration, nutrient deficiency, neural fatigue. He had been alone for a long time. Salith carried him to the med bay and laid him on the diagnostic platform. As she worked, she felt a strange sensation building in her chest. Not fear, not excitement, but something closer to anticipation. She was no longer alone. Hours passed. When the human finally woke, the outpost lights dimmed to a softer glow. He stirred, blinking slowly as awareness returned. His eyes focused on her. Again, he said nothing. Salith sat nearby, her hands folded calmly. "You are in recovery," she said. "Your ship sustained damage. You were close to system failure." His throat bobbed as he swallowed. "How long?" His voice was hoarse and used. "Since your arrival?" she asked. He shook his head weakly. "No." "Alone?" She hesitated. The Erwin valued truth, but also compassion. "Your ship's logs indicate you departed human space 17 years ago." His eyes closed. For a long moment, Salith thought he might retreat into silence again. Then he whispered, "I thought I'd missed everyone. That I'd wake up and that would be it." "You did not," she said softly. He opened his eyes again, studying her luminous skin, the faint bioluminescent lines along her temples, her elongated pupils. Instead of fear, she saw wonder. "You waited here," he said slowly. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "Why?" She considered the answer. Because someone had to remember. In the days that followed, he recovered gradually. His name was Evan Cole, a deep space courier who had been caught in a fold space anomaly during a routine run. Time dilation had thrown him far off course. By the time he escaped, his maps were useless. He had followed weak echoes of old signals, chasing ghosts, until he found Eric's. Salith showed him the outpost, its empty halls, its memory cores filled with voices of the past. Evan listened in silence as she played recordings of humans who had passed through decades earlier. "They sound so alive," he murmured. "They were," she replied. He spent hours repairing his ship, while Salith assisted, fascinated by his improvisation and stubborn persistence. Humans, she learned, fixed problems by refusing to accept that they were impossible. At night, if such a word still applied, they talked. About Earth, about the Erwin, about loneliness. Evan admitted the silence had nearly broken him. He had talked to himself just to hear a voice. Sometimes, he'd imagine someone waiting at the end of his journey, just to keep going. "I didn't think you'd be real," he said one cycle, staring out at the amber sky. "I didn't think humans would return," Salith replied. Their connection deepened slowly, carefully. Two beings shaped by absence, learning presence together. She found herself laughing at his dry humor, feeling warmth at his stories. He found comfort in her steadiness, her quiet understanding. But time moved forward as it always did. One cycle, Evan approached her with a solemn expression. "My ship will be ready soon," he said. "I can reach human space again." Salith felt something tighten inside her. "That is good." He hesitated. "You could come with me." The idea struck her like a sudden burst of light. The heroine rarely left their assignments. Eric's was her duty, her purpose. Yet the thought of returning to silence, of watching another presence fade into memory, felt unbearable. "I am meant to stay," she said quietly. Evan nodded, though disappointment flickered across his face. "I figured you'd say that." On the day of his departure, the outpost hummed with activity for the first time in decades. Evan stood at the airlock, his repaired suit gleaming faintly. He paused. "You waited alone for so long," he said. "You shouldn't have to do that again." Salith stepped closer. "I waited," she said, "but I was not wrong to do so." He smiled, a tired, genuine smile.
"No.
"You weren't." Then he did something unexpected. He removed a small data crystal from his suit and pressed it into her hand. "My logs," he said. "Not official ones. Personal. So, you remember me, the way I was." She curled her fingers around it, her bioluminescence brightening. "I will." Evan hesitated, then leaned forward and wrapped his arms around her. Salith froze for half a second, then returned the embrace, carefully, fully. She felt his heartbeat, steady and strong, and memorized it. When he stepped back, his eyes were bright. "Goodbye, Salith." "Safe travels, Evan Cole." The airlock sealed. The ship departed, shrinking into the amber sky until it vanished. Silence returned. But it was different now. Salith stood in the observation chamber long after the sensors confirmed his safe jump to fold space. She activated the memory core and began a new archive. Not of a vanished civilization, but of a return. She labeled it simply, "The human who appeared without a word." And as the outpost settled back into its quiet vigil, Salith no longer felt like she was waiting alone. She was waiting with hope. Time did not stop after Evan left. It never did. But for the first time since Salith had taken her post at Outpost Eric's, time no longer felt like an enemy. The cycles passed with quiet purpose instead of hollow repetition. She still walked the perimeter. She still calibrated the listening arrays. She still tended the memory cores. Yet now, each action carried meaning beyond duty. She replayed Evan's log slowly, carefully, never all at once. His voice filled the halls, sometimes calm, sometimes strained, sometimes laughing at things only he found funny. He spoke of Earth's oceans, of rainstorms that smelled like metal and dust, of cities that never slept because humans feared silence more than exhaustion. Salith listened and learned. She noticed something unexpected within herself: change. Her people believed identity was static, shaped early, and then refined only by observation. But she found herself reacting differently to the world around her. The amber sky no longer felt endless. It felt open. The silence no longer pressed against her thoughts. It waited. One cycle, months after Evan's departure, the listening array chimed softly. Salith looked up at once. A signal. Not a distortion. Not background noise. A transmission. Her breath caught as she isolated the frequency. Human encryption. Old, but intact. The message was brief, fragmented by distance and interference, but unmistakable. Reached human space. Told them about Eric's. About you. They're listening. Salitha's bioluminescence flared, bright enough to illuminate the chamber. She pressed her hand to the console, steadying herself as something unfamiliar rippled through her, something dangerously close to joy. Humans were listening again. In the cycles that followed, probes appeared at the edge of the system. Then, unmanned relays. Trade pings cautiously tested forgotten routes. Eric's long-dormant systems awakened one by one, responding to signals that had once filled these halls with life. Salith recorded everything. She documented the return not as a historian, but as a witness. She spoke of what it meant to wait, of what it cost to remember when others forgot. Her reports carried emotion, something the Erewhon archives rarely contained. When the first human diplomatic vessel arrived, years later, Salith stood at the airlock once more. This time, the door opened to many voices. Humans stepped forward, cautious but curious, their eyes widening as they took in the station and its lone caretaker. Among them were engineers, historians, and explorers, people who wanted to rebuild what had been lost. They spoke to her. They listened. And when they asked how Eric's had survived so long without fading into nothingness, Salith told them the truth. Because someone once arrived when I thought no one ever would, she said. And because he reminded me that waiting is not the same as being empty. Eric's became a waypoint again, a place of rest, a symbol, not of abandonment, but of return. Years later still, when Salith reviewed the archives of the Silent Expanse, she added one final note to the record. Civilizations do not vanish when their ships leave. They vanish when no one waits for them to come back. And somewhere beyond the restored trade routes, Evan Cole listened to stories of a station that had become legendary, a place where silence had been broken not by conquest or command, but by patience. By one being who waited alone, and one human who arrived without a word.